This story begins at Liang City No. 1 High School. On the huge school field, thousands of students stand in perfect rows. The atmosphere is tense. Everyone knows today is not an ordinary day. A teacher steps forward and speaks loudly. He tells the students a harsh truth. Only those who enter the Hongji class will have a real chance to become warriors in the future. For everyone else, this path will be closed. Next, he explains the rules. The class placement exam is just like the college entrance exam. It has two parts, a cultural test and a martial arts test. The total score is 750 points, 225 points for culture, 525 points for martial arts. Then comes the most brutal rule. Only the top 10 students can enter the Hongji class. No mercy, no exceptions. Soon the cultural exam will begin, and students are ordered to enter the exam hall one by one. For many students, this is their only chance to change their fate. Among the crowd, a quiet boy clenches his fist. This chance means more to him than anyone else. He is our protagonist, Chengdu. He remembers that during his first year of high school, he suddenly collapsed and lost consciousness. His parents were terrified and forced him to take 2 full years of medical leave. While others trained and grew stronger, he was left behind. And he knows this is probably his last chance to become a warrior. This time, he will not let it slip away. As Chengdu walked down the corridor toward the exam hall, he suddenly bumped into a few students who were blocking the way. One of the students laughed and said it was surprising to see Chengdu there. He said he did not expect Chengdu to actually come and take the exam. Another student pointed at him and mocked him, saying everyone had a chance to take the Hongji class exam. Yet Chengdu had taken 2 years off since his first year and still dared to come. The group laughed again. The student in front stepped closer, his face dark and full of malice. He said young people really had guts. He mocked Chengdu for getting sick, taking 2 years off, and still daring to come straight to the Hongji class exam. Chengdu looked at him calmly and replied that there was no need for concern. He said the other person should focus on how to pass the upcoming exam himself. The mocking student suddenly grabbed Chengdu's hand, trying to intimidate him. Chengdu immediately tightened his grip and stopped him. The man's expression changed and sweat appeared on his face. Chengdu released his hand and turned away. He walked toward the exam room without looking back. The group watched Chengdu walk away, their faces full of anger. One of them said Chengdu was clearly someone who had been bullied in his first year. He could not understand how Chengdu had become so arrogant now. He suggested dealing with him after the exam. Another student clenched his hand and felt lingering pain. He frowned and quietly wondered if Chengdu's grip was a bit too strong. The leader snorted and scolded them, saying they were brainless. He said that if they made a move now and got caught, their exam qualifications would be revoked. He told them to wait until the martial arts assessment before taking action. Inside the exam hall, Chengdu took his seat and turned on the computer. He looked calm and focused, placing his hands on the desk. Other students sat down around him as the room grew quiet. Meanwhile, the leader's face twisted into a cruel smile, red killing intent rising behind him. He said that during the exam they would cripple Chengdu. If Chengdu was accidentally crippled during the exam, no one would be able to say anything about it. Back at his seat, Chengdu stared at the screen as the first question appeared. The exam began with a general knowledge question, asking the students to briefly describe the current world background and the starting day of the High Martial Calendar. Chengdu looked at the question and frowned, remembering that in the year 2842 of the Old Era, an otherworldly civilization was discovered. Not long after, they invaded Earth. Humanity responded by launching nuclear weapons. 2 years later, humanity suffered a complete defeat in the total nuclear war. The death toll exceeded 5 billion people. Under full-scale nuclear radiation, human bodies were pushed beyond their limits. Humans began to evolve. Terrifying creatures appeared across ruined cities, and powerful beings rose from the chaos. On August 27, 2860 of the Old Era, all adults reached life strength level 2. That day marked the end of the Old Era and the beginning of a new age. It became known as the initial day of the High Martial Calendar. The exam continued with more questions. The second question asked about important individuals who made major contributions during the early wars of the High Martial Calendar. The third question asked what wrong policies different nations proposed to restore world order. A fourth question followed. After finishing the questions, the exam reached its end. Chengdu moved the mouse and submitted the exam. His expression stayed calm. The result appeared. It showed a perfect score. He leaned back slightly and thought about the past. After the incident, he had not slept for 2 years. During that time, he had been badly injured and kept entering a strange space again and again. Inside that space, his spiritual power awakened and he gained a photographic memory. Because of this, even after being away from school for 2 years, he still had the confidence to take the exam. However, he knew the cultural exam was only worth 225 points. He still needed to go home and properly prepare for the martial arts assessment. Later, Chengdu returned home. As he went inside the house, his dad was preparing dinner. Chengdu walked in with his bag on his shoulder. As he moved forward, his foot brushed against something. A card slipped out of his pocket and fell to the floor. His sister nearby bent down and picked it up. She mocked him for being clumsy and warned him not to lose his admission ticket. Moments later, the family gathered around the dining table as dinner was served. Suddenly, Chengdu's father spoke and asked him to look. Chengdu paused while holding his chopsticks. He looked toward the bottle placed on the table and frowned slightly. He asked his father where those chi blood pills came from. His father smiled and explained that since Chengdu was about to take the Hongji class exam, he had bought the chi blood pills to help boost his score. Chengdu looked serious and said that he could get in even without using those pills. His father reached out and patted Chengdu's head, telling him to stop overthinking things. He said that even though he himself could not become a warrior, whether it was Chengdu or his younger sister, the family could still afford to support warriors. He told him to eat well, drink well, and not worry, because there was always a way to make money. Chengdu lowered his head and listened quietly. After a moment he nodded. A faint smile appeared on his face. Late at night, Chengdu sat cross-legged on his bed, his breathing slow and steady. He thought about the chi blood pills. One bottle alone cost 200,000. Buying them had almost drained the family's savings. In this society, if someone did not become a warrior, they could not even guarantee their family's safety. Chengdu understood this very well. He closed his eyes and focused. Whether tomorrow's exam would go smoothly depended on tonight. As his mind sank deeper, a cold blue light appeared. Energy gathered between his hands, glowing quietly as fragments of crystal floated around him. In the next moment, his consciousness entered a familiar place. Towering crystal pillars rose around him, filling the space with icy light. A sword was stuck in the ground nearby. Chengdu stood there calmly, surrounded by danger. After that incident, every night when he fell asleep, he would enter this crystal space. There were many monsters here. Their goal was to destroy the crystal. To protect it, Chengdu had to fight them. If the crystal was destroyed, he would be unconscious for the entire next day. But if he died while fighting to protect the crystal, he would wake up quickly and be full of energy all day. At first, Chengdu did not dare to fight desperately. Because of that, he kept failing again and again, and his body would remain unconscious the next day. Later, he slowly figured out the pattern. Once he understood that death inside the crystal space led to full energy in reality, things gradually began to improve. Each time he successfully defended against a wave of monsters, his spiritual power increased a little. That growth greatly enhanced his memory and comprehension. Even after being away from school for 2 years, he could still keep up without trouble. But every time he defended against a wave of monsters, the next wave would arrive in 30 seconds. And the process repeated like that until he died or successfully defended against the wave of monsters. However, the unfortunate part was that only the first successful defense of the crystal was effective. The next moment, the battlefield turned violent again. Chengdu rushed forward, slashing through a monster with blazing force. Blood and energy exploded as the creature was torn apart. He flipped through the air, sword still in hand, and smashed down toward the ground. The impact shook the entire crystal space as cracks spread beneath him. Breathing heavily and covered in wounds, Chengdu raised his head. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth as steam escaped with his breath. He stretched out his hand and opened his status window. A blue interface opened in front of him, displaying Chengdu's current status. He looked at the data calmly and thought that with his current stats, it still would not be enough to enter the Hongji class and become an elite warrior in the future. Before he could think further, another alert appeared. The screen announced that the 5th wave of monsters was coming and told the player to prepare. Chengdu narrowed his eyes and lifted his head. In the next moment, a massive red monster rushed out. Flames burst from its mouth as it released a terrifying fire breath. Chengdu reacted instantly. He kicked off the ground and shot forward, dodging through the sea of fire as heat and shockwaves spread around him. He landed hard, gripping his sword tightly, sliding across the cracked ground. The monster attacked again, swinging its claws down with overwhelming force. Chengdu leaped sideways and raised his blade. Then he leaped high into the air, sword pointed downward, aiming straight at the giant red lizard's body. The monster twisted violently. Its massive tail swept across the battlefield like a red storm. The strike slammed into Chengdu mid-air. His body was sent spinning, blood spraying as the impact shook his bones. He forced himself to twist his body and barely stabilized before hitting the ground, rolling across the scorched earth. The giant lizard did not stop. Its huge body surged forward, pressing down with overwhelming presence. Chengdu pushed himself up, gripping his sword tightly. After experiencing so many deaths, he had finally grasped the giant lizard's attack patterns and rhythm. His eyes sharpened. Spiritual power surged around his body as he stepped forward without hesitation. He charged straight at the monster, sword glowing as he thrust upward toward its head, launching his counterattack with precise timing. Chengdu activated his sword, flowing light sword technique. A blue sword light burst forward like a sharp breeze cutting through the forest. The attack slammed into the giant red lizard's body, sparks and energy exploding on impact. The monster roared in pain. Its eyes burned red as its aura suddenly surged. It went berserk. Chengdu was pushed back by the violent backlash. He twisted his body in mid-air and barely stabilized himself, landing hard on the lizard's body. He frowned and admitted that he had been careless, but at least he was not seriously injured. The giant lizard opened its mouth wide and let out a furious roar, flames and killing intent flooding the area. Chengdu steadied his breathing and tightened his grip on the sword. He told himself to stay calm. This time he would definitely win. The red-scaled monster swung its massive body, opening its mouth wide as it roared. Its sharp fangs flashed, and sparks scattered through the air. Wrapped in blue light, Chengdu shot forward like a streak of lightning. His body cut through the air, closing the distance in an instant. The monster's eyes widened. It opened its jaws even wider, its tongue lashing out as it tried to swallow him whole. A loud impact echoed as Chengdu twisted his body mid-air and narrowly avoided the bite. He spun away, blue energy surging around him as he was flung backward by the force. His feet scraped through the air as he steadied himself. His face tightened, teeth clenched, sweat running down his cheek. His eyes stayed locked on the monster. The red beast suddenly reared back and spewed a torrent of flames. Fire roared forward, filling the space between them. Chengdu leaped again, using the monster's size to his advantage. He darted downward, slipping beneath its attack, his blue aura blazing brighter. In the next moment he dove straight toward the monster's lower body. His attack came crashing down like a falling blade, the force tearing through the air as he struck. The red-scaled monster raised its head and released a blazing stream of fire. Flames poured from its mouth, lighting up its chest as heat spread in all directions. Chengdu reacted instantly. His body burst with blue light as he shouted, activating agility. He tightened his grip on the sword and surged upward. In the next moment, his blade came down in a straight line of blue light. The strike crashed onto the monster's head with overwhelming force. The impact shook the ground. The monster let out a furious roar as its massive body slammed downward. Rocks shattered and debris flew everywhere. Blue energy exploded across the monster's body. Chengdu landed firmly, sliding to a stop as the glow around him slowly faded. The sword was now deeply embedded in the monster's body. The red giant collapsed, completely crushed. A system notification appeared in front of Chengdu, congratulating him for successfully defending against 5 waves of monster attacks. His spiritual power level increased by 1. Another notification followed, stating that the defense waves were fully completed and that a void immortal visualization method had been obtained. Chengdu stared ahead, shocked. Sweat slid down his face as he processed the reward. He thought that the increase in spiritual power itself was nothing special. But this visualization method was different. He then remembered what the school had explained before. Visualization methods were a rare type of technique, one that could actively cultivate spiritual power. Although he could increase his spiritual power level through system rewards, this kind of benefit was always better to have more of. Just as that thought settled, a system notification appeared, warning the host to prepare because the next wave of monsters was about to arrive. Chengdu turned his head to the side, breathing heavily. Steam escaped his mouth as dust and debris slowly drifted down around him. His eyes suddenly sharpened. In the distance, a strange pressure descended. The air darkened, and countless shadows began to emerge. A group of monsters gathered together, their massive bodies overlapping one another. Their eyes glowed red in the darkness, filled with killing intent. Chengdu stared at them, his expression turning serious. He quickly judged the situation. Each of those monsters had life strength 1 level higher than his own, and there were a full 30 of them. From his reaction, it was clear that passing this stage would not be easy anytime soon. After that, he returned to reality. Later he sat quietly, cross-legged in his room, his hands resting together as he tried to calm his breathing. He decided to put everything else aside and check the visualization method first. A glowing blue interface unfolded in his hand. Lines of light flowed like data as the method activated. In the next instant, the world around him changed. He found himself standing on a vast, glowing surface that looked like flowing water made of light. Blue fragments drifted in the air. His eyes widened in surprise as he looked around, trying to understand where he was. Then, a terrifying presence appeared. In the distance, an enormous shadow rose up. A giant figure stood before him, its body towering into the darkness. Its many eyes glowed red, staring straight at him with overwhelming pressure. Chengdu felt his breathing tighten. He lifted his head slowly and finally understood why it was called a visualization method. As long as he gazed at this giant, it would put him through trials. Back in the real world, he sat cross-legged on the bed. Blue flames of spiritual energy surrounded his body, rising and falling as he entered cultivation. The room was silent, filled only with the faint hum of energy. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Chengdu's sister called him to come out to eat. Chengdu stood beside the bed, wiping his body with a towel. Sweat traced down his muscles, his physique clearly more defined than before. His sister watched him and teased that he seemed a bit more handsome. He glanced over, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. He replied calmly, questioning whether he had not been handsome before. The girl puffed up in protest. She stepped closer, then suddenly yelped as he reached out and rubbed her head. She struggled and complained loudly, saying that he was messing up her hair. The girl froze for a moment, staring at him with wide eyes. A faint blush spread across her face as she muttered in confusion, wondering if her brother had always been this handsome. In front of the mirror, Chengdu examined his reflection in silence. His expression grew thoughtful as he noticed the subtle changes in his body. He wondered if this was the effect of the Void Immortal visualization method. Not long after, he finished getting ready and shouldered his bag. Before leaving, he called out that he was heading to the exam. From behind him, his father reminded him to be careful on the road. The scene shifted to Liang City, #1 high school sports arena. Sunlight filtered through the high ceiling as the vast indoor court slowly filled with students. Chengdu stood on the arena floor, stretching his arms and loosening his shoulders. As he moved, he could clearly feel the changes in his body. Strength flowed smoothly through his limbs, and his breathing felt steady and controlled. He silently confirmed that the Void Immortal visualization method was working well. He could feel improvements in every aspect of his body. While he was warming up, a mocking voice suddenly rang out. Someone recognized him and spoke with a tone full of sarcasm, calling him the so-called genius student Chengdu, who had taken 2 years off from school. Chengdu paused his movement and turned his head slightly, his expression calm. The voice continued, growing louder and more arrogant. They sneered that he used to be a bottom-ranked student, had skipped school for 2 years, and still dared to take the Hongji class assessment. They mocked him, pretending to praise his kindness for coming just to raise the bottom rankings. Chengdu looked at them quietly, then he spoke in a flat, steady voice, saying that he was still better than someone who could not even pass the cultural exam. The atmosphere instantly changed. One of the students' faces twisted in anger. Another shouted furiously, demanding to know what Chengdu had just said. Chengdu looked at them calmly and spoke with a faint smile. He said that if someone could not even hear such simple words clearly, then they were probably not qualified to take the exam. The leader's expression darkened immediately. He warned Chengdu not to push his luck. Chengdu glanced at him and casually introduced himself, saying his name was Zhang Bei and telling him not to take things so personally. Before the situation could escalate further, another student hurried forward and raised both hands to stop them. He laughed awkwardly and said that the assessment was what truly mattered. If something really happened and a teacher showed up, it would not be good for anyone. The angry group clicked their tongues in dissatisfaction. As they turned to leave, the leader looked back and threw out a cold warning, telling Chengdu to just wait and that he would get what was coming to him soon. After they walked away, one of Chengdu's classmates rushed over, panic written all over his face. He grabbed Chengdu's sleeve and said anxiously that he was done for. Chengdu remained calm and replied that it was fine. He would deal with things as they came. The classmate shook his head and explained nervously that this was not something Chengdu could take lightly. He reminded him that he had taken 2 years off from school. Lowering his voice, the classmate revealed the reason for Feng Rui's arrogance. Feng Rui's second uncle had become the dean of academic affairs at the school. It was rumored that the dean had already leaked the martial arts assessment questions to Feng Rui this year. Chengdu listened quietly, his expression turning serious. In his heart, he concluded that he needed to be careful. It seemed Feng Rui might collude with teachers to sabotage him during the assessment. Just then, a large announcement panel appeared, clearly explaining the rules of the martial arts assessment. The test would consist of 2 parts, a strength test followed by combat duels. All examinees were instructed to enter their assigned exam rooms in groups of 10, according to their exam numbers. The strength test would begin first. As the students lined up, Chengdu's classmate reminded him that the exam was about to start. He told him not to think too much and just get in line. Soon the group was led into the testing area. A massive sandbag device stood before them, shaped like a strange creature with glowing red eyes. The atmosphere instantly became heavy. New rules were announced. The exam would use a last-place elimination system. Everyone had to strike the sandbag with full force at the same time. Those with the lowest scores would be eliminated on the spot. Murmurs spread through the group. Chengdu's classmate complained that this year's strength test was far too harsh. Chengdu listened quietly. He remained composed as he analyzed the situation. He reminded himself that there was still a combat duel coming afterward. Conserving strength was important. His gaze sharpened. He made a simple decision in his heart. He would win with speed. Blue energy surged around his arm as he stepped forward. His fist tightened, his expression cold and focused, as he prepared to strike. Meanwhile, Feng Rui cracked his knuckles and laughed confidently, saying that this test was a piece of cake and that he had strength to spare. A clear announcement rang out across the arena, declaring that the first group's assessment had begun. Chengdu stood quietly among the group, his expression calm and focused. Across from him, Feng Rui's face appeared fierce and twisted with arrogance, his red eyes filled with excitement as killing intent surged. In the next instant, Feng Rui stepped forward. He roared as he swung his fist with full force. Red energy exploded around his arm as his punch smashed into the sandbag. A deafening impact shook the arena. The massive sandbag caved inward, waves of force rippling outward as dust and shockwaves filled the air. Feng Rui was pushed back slightly, his feet sliding as the ground trembled beneath him. The crowd froze for a moment, then erupted. Students shouted in excitement, calling Feng Rui amazing and praising his overwhelming strength. Someone yelled that it was exactly what they expected from him, and that he was far too strong. More voices followed, whispering in shock. They said they had heard Feng Rui's strength had already reached nearly 1,400 jin. One of Feng Rui's followers smirked and pointed ahead, saying that their boss had taken first place and that someone else was probably going to be eliminated this round. In the next instant, Chengdu moved. His figure blurred. A deep pressure surged through the air as his fist shot forward. A violent shockwave exploded across the testing area. The sandbag caved in with a thunderous boom, its massive body warping violently as the force tore through it. For a moment, the entire arena went silent. Students froze in place, eyes wide in disbelief. Someone shouted in shock, asking what had just happened. Another voice trembled as it reported the result. 1,500 jin of punching force achieved at only life strength level 5.1. Feng Rui's confident expression cracked. He turned his head sharply, veins bulging as disbelief flashed across his face. Whispers erupted everywhere. People questioned which class Chengdu was from, how he could be this strong, and why his name had never appeared in the top 50 last year. From the crowd, Chengdu's classmate jumped up excitedly and shouted at the top of his lungs, calling Chengdu his bro. Behind him, others stared in shock, unable to accept what they had just seen. In his heart, Chengdu's classmate screamed in disbelief, wondering when his bro had become this terrifyingly strong. The examiner stood with his arms crossed, his fingers resting against his chin as his eyes narrowed. He thought that a life strength level of 5.1 normally corresponded to only 1,000 jin of punching force, and that no one in the Hongji class could achieve such a result. To think that a student this capable existed in a regular class made no sense. He suspected it might be due to Chengdu's martial skills. He then spoke again, asking to see Chengdu's file. A staff member quickly handed over the documents. As the examiner read, his gaze sharpened. The file stated that Chengdu was a regular class student who had taken 2 years off and had still managed to reach first-order martial strength at 55%. The examiner lowered the file and looked toward the arena, his eyes filled with interest. He said that this afternoon he would have to take a good look at Chengdu's true strength. The scene shifted to the combat arena, where the examiner stood alone in the center. He stepped forward with a list in hand and announced loudly that students whose names were called should come up for their combat duels. The examiner called out Chengdu and Feng Rui and asked them to come to the combat arena. The two figures stood facing each other, their expressions completely different. Chengdu looked calm and cold, while Feng Rui wore a twisted smile full of confidence and hostility. Among the students watching, whispers spread quickly. Someone said that even though Chengdu had just returned to school, his strength test score was unbelievable. They wondered if he could really win this time. Another student shook his head and replied that it was impossible. He said Feng Rui would definitely win. Combat duels depended on martial skills, not raw strength. Having strong power alone did not give much advantage. On the arena, Feng Rui stepped forward and pointed his weapon at Chen Du. He warned him not to think that beating him in the last round meant he would be lucky again this time. Chen Du stopped and slowly turned his head. His expression remained relaxed. A faint smile appeared on his face as he replied that he hoped Feng Rui could still be this arrogant later. The tension between the two instantly filled the arena. Feng Rui attacked first. He charged forward with his metal staff, his movements sharp and aggressive. His foot slammed into the ground as he swung, the force tearing through the air. Sparks burst out where the weapon passed, carrying the intent to suppress his opponent through pure martial power. Chen Du moved at the same time. He stepped in, his body light and controlled. As the staff came down, he raised his sword and blocked it cleanly. The clash rang out loudly, sending shockwaves across the arena. In the next instant, Chen Du counterattacked. His sword flashed upward, forcing Fenru back. Fenru's eyes widened as he hurriedly twisted his body, barely avoiding a direct hit. The impact still sent him flying, his body flipping in the air before crashing down hard onto the ground. Feng Rui landed on one knee, gripping his staff tightly as he struggled to steady himself. His expression twisted in disbelief and anger. In Feng Rui's mind, a thought screamed out. Chen Du, the one who could enter the Hongji class, would definitely be him. A violent aura suddenly burst out from Feng Rui's body. His eyes glowed red as he roared and leaped forward again, gathering all his strength into a single desperate strike. He slammed his weapon down with full force. Chen Du reacted instantly. He stepped forward and thrust his sword straight ahead. A sharp beam of force shot out, tearing through the air like a blade of light. Chen Du's gaze remained calm as sparks drifted past his face. He thought to himself that fighting real people was somewhat different from fighting monsters in the crystal space. In the next instant he moved. His body twisted sharply as orange light surged around him. He stepped in and struck, his attack spinning like a blazing arc. The force exploded outward, ripping through the air with violent momentum. The impact crashed down like a falling pillar of light. The arena shook as power slammed straight into Feng Rui. Feng Rui was thrown backward. His body spun uncontrollably as the shockwave tore through the ground beneath him. Dust, debris and fragments burst into the air. Feng Rui suddenly coughed violently. Blood sprayed from his mouth as his eyes widened in pain. In the next moment, Feng Rui's hand moved. A short blade flashed as he drew it smoothly, his expression cold and focused. Chen Du stepped in without hesitation. His sword came down in a sharp arc, the strike carrying overwhelming force. The impact landed squarely on Feng Rui, sparks bursting at the point of contact. Feng Rui tried to resist, his face twisting in fear and shock. But before he could recover, Chen Du closed the distance. A heavy punch smashed straight into Feng Rui's face. The sound echoed sharply. Feng Rui's eyes rolled back as his body flew backward. He crashed hard onto the ground, limbs limp, completely knocked out. The arena fell silent for a split second. In the stands, students stared in disbelief. Someone shouted that Chen Du had actually won. Another voice yelled in shock, unable to understand what had just happened. Some even muttered wildly, wondering if Chen Du had taken drugs or done something unbelievable. On the arena floor, Feng Rui lay motionless. The examiner raised his hand and spoke calmly, ordering the medical team to check Feng Rui's condition. He then announced that the students in the next combat duel should prepare. Just then, the examiner called out for Chen Du to wait a moment. Chen Du paused and turned his head. A bead of sweat slid down his face as he looked back calmly. Teacher Ling stood in the arena, hands behind his back, his expression steady and composed. Chen Du stepped forward and lowered his head slightly. He apologized, saying that he had been too caught up in the moment and had failed to control his strength properly. Teacher Ling looked at him for a second, then spoke in a calm tone. He said that getting injured in combat duels was normal and told Chen Du not to worry about it. He reminded him to be more careful next time and added that Chen Du had worked hard today. Before dismissing him, he casually told him to remember to stretch when he got home. Chen Du straightened and thanked his teacher respectfully. As Chen Du stepped aside, Teacher Ling's gaze shifted toward the direction Feng Rui had been taken. In his mind, he noted that Feng Rui had been beaten badly, yet had not suffered any serious external injuries. It was most likely because of Chen Du's overwhelming advantage in martial skills. Teacher Ling clenched his gloved fist slightly, his expression turning thoughtful. He then called Wang Sai, telling him to contact the principal immediately. Wang Sai responded loudly, acknowledging the order without hesitation. Meanwhile, Chen Du walked down the quiet hallway, his footsteps echoing softly. He thought to himself that it was still early. His father and sister would not be home until later. Soon he stopped in front of a large machine, the virtual combat pod. He looked at it calmly. Although he could not afford real one-on-one sparring partners, the school had provided every student with one of these. He stepped closer, recalling how it worked. As long as he lay down inside, the system would automatically match him with opponents of similar skill level for combat training. Since he had always been fighting monsters in the crystal space, he had not done much virtual combat. Because of that, his current rank was only bronze. Reaching out, he plugged the cable into the socket. As the machine powered up, another thought crossed his mind. Feng Rui had lost badly today. Because of that, there was a high chance someone would try to cause trouble for him, all to stop him from entering the Hongji class. Chengdu stood in front of the open virtual combat pod, quietly observing the seat inside. He knew that every combat record from the virtual pod would be uploaded to the Blue Star Youth Rankings, a special leaderboard created for college exam students. It was also known as the Genius Rankings. This ranking represented pure martial skill strength and was recognized across all ecological zones worldwide. Even many students from the Hongji class had failed to appear on this list. Chengdu sat down and slowly closed his eyes. He understood clearly that as long as he could make a name for himself on the Blue Star Youth Rankings, he could earn his way into the Hongji class through real ability alone. The pod activated. Light flickered, and his surroundings changed as the virtual space formed around him. His body appeared inside the simulation, standing on a clean white platform. He thought calmly that ever since obtaining the crystal space, he had barely used the virtual combat pod. He decided to warm up with a single match first. Blue data fragments gathered in front of him. An opponent began to materialize. Chengdu looked ahead, slightly puzzled. He wondered where his opponent was. At that moment, before Chengdu could react further, a calm voice echoed in the space. In the next instant, a blur of motion descended from above. A purple-haired female figure dropped down with deadly precision, blade flashing as she aimed straight for Chengdu. The moment the purple-haired girl struck, Chengdu reacted instantly. He twisted his body and raised his sword, barely blocking the sudden attack. The impact exploded with force, shockwaves rippling across the ground. The girl landed lightly and smiled. She praised him, saying that his reactions were pretty good. Then her expression sharpened. She reminded him that this was not a school exam where opponents waited politely before attacking. In real combat, hesitation meant death. Chengdu straightened, gripping his sword tighter. He calmly replied that the lesson was learned. From now on, he would not give her another chance to ambush him. Blue light flared around his body as his aura surged. The two clashed again. Their figures twisted through the air, blades colliding again and again. Blue arcs of light tore across the battlefield as Chengdu advanced aggressively, forcing the girl back step by step. A powerful move burst forth. Azure Dragon Thrust. Chengdu's sword shot forward like a raging dragon, the strike sharp and overwhelming. The girl's eyes widened slightly as she dodged at the last moment. She looked at him in surprise and pointed out that he had used Azure Dragon Thrust. She noted that it was clearly a thrust-type move, yet he was wielding it like a sword technique. Chengdu pressed forward without hesitation, launching another fierce attack. As she retreated, the girl spoke again, her tone turning instructive. She told him that the four flowing light forms did not need to be confined to a single shape. What mattered was understanding the true essence of the martial skill itself. Chengdu felt his mind snap into clarity. He realized that sword techniques should never be trapped by rigid forms. Power was meant to flow freely, not be restrained by labels or structure. As his blade swung, a sharp arc of light cut through the air. At the same time, a doubt flashed through his mind. He wondered how the girl knew his sword technique so clearly. Before he could think further, her voice rang out, warning him not to get distracted. She moved like lightning. Her strength was overwhelming, and Chengdu could not tell what basic martial skill she had learned. Every strike felt unfamiliar, yet perfectly refined. The girl flipped through the air and pressed down relentlessly. Chengdu raised his sword to defend, but his focus slipped for just a moment. She seized that opening. She shouted that he had let his guard down. Purple energy exploded as her attack slammed into him. Chengdu cursed in frustration as his body was sent flying backward. The impact shattered the space around him. The virtual battlefield dissolved. A system screen appeared announcing the result. The pig-masked Chengdu was defeated. The match ended with the little girl's victory, and 10 victory points were awarded. As the light faded, a final thought crossed Chengdu's mind. She could have defeated him easily with raw strength alone, yet she still chose to ambush him. Chengdu sat in the virtual space, tapping his temple as the girl's words echoed in his mind. He told himself to think more about the essence of the martial skill. He recalled the flowing light sword technique. It had 4 forms in total, and right now the only one he had not fully grasped was Azure Dragon Thrust. As a thrusting move, its nature was closer to that of an assassin, fast, precise and deadly. That realization hit him hard. Assassins excelled at ambushing, while his own fighting style was far too straightforward. Without hesitation, Chengdu reached out and tapped the virtual keyboard. He decided to test this theory in actual combat. Without wasting any time, he started the next match. A massive opponent appeared before him, a towering, muscular man wielding a heavy chain weapon. Chengdu looked up at the iron ball dragging along the ground and felt immediate pressure. He complained inwardly that he had just run into a sneaky player, and now the system had matched him against someone with a clear weapon advantage. He wondered what kind of insane matchmaking system this was. But without thinking anymore, Chengdu charged forward, blue light surging beneath his feet as he closed the distance. In his mind, he stayed calm. Even if the opponent had a weapon advantage, his martial skill was clearly higher. The advantage was his. A wave of sword light surged upward like a pillar, forcing the massive man to brace himself. Sparks and energy scattered as the attack cut through the air. The ground trembled, as if space itself were being torn apart. The heavy man sneered and shouted that this was not how a sword should be used. He mocked Chengdu, saying that just because Chengdu's martial skill was slightly better, did not mean he could act however he pleased. Before the words even finished echoing, the sword light struck. Blood sprayed from the man's mouth as his body was thrown back violently. His face twisted in pain and shock as the force overwhelmed him. The iron ball chained to his arm was suddenly smashed aside. The impact exploded with a deafening roar like the drums of war beating across the battlefield. The massive weapon was knocked completely off course. A violent burst of blue light erupted as Chengdu moved. The sword intent surged like a raging wind, spreading outward in layers. A move activated, breeze beneath the forest. The heavy iron ball trembled violently as the energy crashed into it. The massive man's eyes widened in shock. He had not expected the attack to change direction so suddenly. Before he could react, Chengdu vanished from his sight. In the next instant, Chengdu appeared behind him. Chengdu's body twisted mid-air, his sword thrusting down with precision. The blade plunged straight past the man's defense. The opponent's face froze in disbelief. He shouted in shock, unable to understand how Chengdu had moved from the front to his back in a single breath. Blue light coiled around the sword like a living dragon. Azure Dragon Thrust. The thrust pierced through with explosive force. The man's body convulsed as blood sprayed from his mouth. The overwhelming power crushed him completely. The iron ball slammed to the ground with a deafening crash, the chains rattling uselessly behind it. A system screen appeared, congratulating Chengdu for winning and earning 10 points. Chengdu stood still, lowering his sword. Blue particles slowly faded around him as he looked down at his hands. He realized that this was the first time he had successfully executed Azure Dragon Thrust. Chengdu stood quietly, his pig mask tilted slightly as blue light drifted around him. A thought surfaced in his mind. He wondered why the sword was called ingenious. As his understanding deepened, he realized that ingenious did not mean mere dexterity, it meant adaptability. The sword could be hard or soft, it could be hidden or revealed, it could strike like thunder, fierce and unstoppable, or flow gently like calm water. As the final form of the flowing light sword technique, Azure Dragon Thrust was not meant to be rigid, it was meant to teach him this truth. The sword was not bound to a single stance or method. It could be wielded openly and honorably, or used for sudden covert strikes. Standing there, Chengdu lowered his sword slightly, his eyes sharpened behind the mask. He understood now. The sword was a weapon that defied definition. A system notification appeared. Congratulations, host. Flowing light sword technique increased from first order 89% to first order 90%. Chengdu smiled faintly. Another system message followed, its tone urging him onward. Combat deepened understanding. One more battle. Another notification flashed. Congratulations, host. Flowing light sword technique increased. Chengdu tightened his grip on the sword. System messages continued to appear, one after another, as his comprehension steadily rose. Each clash sharpened his insight. Each fight refined his sword. After continuously refining his sword technique and winning many matches, Chengdu became so hungry that he decided to take a short break and come out of his virtual combat pod. A system voice congratulated him, announcing that he had entered the top 10,000 of the Blue Star Youth rankings. Chengdu froze, his eyes widened as he stared ahead, stunned by what he had just heard. He repeated the words slowly, unable to believe them. Top 10,000 of the Blue Star Youth Rankings. After a brief pause, he spoke again, telling the system to show him all his ranking details. The interface immediately responded. Blue Star Youth Rankings, Rank 6219, 7th Ecological Zone Youth Rankings, Rank 654, Giant Bear Domain Youth Rankings, Rank 55ish, Purple Cloud District Youth Rankings, Rank 7, Liang City Youth Rankings, Rank 1. The system confirmed the request with a calm reply. Chengdu's breathing quickened as he read through the results. His expression shifted from shock to excitement. He had not expected that after mastering Azure Dragon Thrust this time, he would become first in all Liang City Youth Rankings. His grip tightened on the armrest. A wide smile spread across his face as excitement burst out of him. In his heart, he knew it was settled now. His place in the Hongji class was secured. After that, Chengdu walked along the road with a backpack on his shoulder, heading toward his home. But suddenly, someone shouted his name. Chengdu paused and turned his head. A middle-aged man stood not far away, pointing at him with a stern expression. He scolded Chengdu, saying that seeing a teacher and not greeting him was ill-mannered. The man was Feng Liguo, the Dean of Academic Affairs of Liang City No. 1 High School, and Feng Rui's second uncle. Chengdu turned around fully and greeted him politely, calling him teacher. Nearby students watched quietly. Some of them stared at Chengdu's armband, their expressions changing as recognition slowly spread. Feng Liguo frowned and spoke again. He announced that this semester, as the Dean of Academic Affairs, he would personally conduct uniform inspections. He pointed at Chengdu and questioned what he was wearing. Chengdu lowered his gaze slightly and replied calmly that it was the school uniform. A few students nearby let out suppressed laughter. Feng Liguo suddenly shouted for silence. Whispers still spread among the students. Some said that Chengdu was in trouble, that Feng Rui had still not been discharged from the hospital, and that his second uncle would definitely seek revenge. Others claimed they heard Chengdu had won by using banned substances, and said he deserved what was coming. Someone else muttered in confusion, saying they thought Chengdu was actually that strong. Feng Liguo suddenly lashed out. He raised the wooden baton and struck down, shouting angrily that this, and this, all of it failed. Chengdu tilted his head slightly and avoided the blows. His expression remained calm. He spoke evenly, saying that everything he was wearing complied with school rules, and he did not understand what was failing. Feng Liguo's face twisted with rage. He pointed at Chengdu and roared, demanding how he dared to talk back. The baton came down again. This time Chengdu reached out and caught it firmly in his hand. The motion was clean and direct. The strike stopped instantly. Feng Liguo froze for a moment. Then he shouted even louder, accusing Chengdu of being disobedient and defying teachers. He declared that he would report Chengdu to the principal and have him expelled. Just then, a calm voice cut through the tension. Someone asked who was looking for him. Chengdu stood holding the broken baton, his expression steady. Feng Liguo stiffened and turned his head. Two men walked forward from the crowd. One was Li Mu, the principal of Liang City No. 1 High School. The other was Wang Anchuan, the mayor of Liang City. The surrounding students fell silent. Feng Liguo hurried forward, pointing excitedly and shouting that it was him. Chengdu. Li Mu stopped in front of Chengdu and looked at him carefully. His expression softened slightly. He asked if Chengdu was really Chengdu. Chengdu was startled for a moment, then nodded and replied that he was. Li Mu smiled faintly and spoke again. He said they had come specifically to see him, and introduced the man beside him as Mayor Wang. Chengdu straightened his posture and greeted them politely. He asked what this was about. Mayor Wang laughed loudly. He said that Chengdu had become No. 1 in the Liao City Youth Rankings and had even entered the top 1% of the Blue Star Youth Rankings. Because of that, he naturally had to come and see what kind of prodigy Chengdu was. The words landed like a shockwave. Feng Liguo froze. His eyes widened as he shouted in disbelief, asking if Chengdu was really in the top 1% of the Blue Star Youth Rankings. Behind him, the surrounding students stared in shock, mouths hanging open as the truth finally sank in. Whispers spread through the crowd. Students stared at Chengdu in awe, exclaiming that he was actually that amazing. Someone muttered that, with that level of strength, Chengdu would never need drugs to defeat Feng Rui. Others excitedly said that Brother Du was so talented that he was definitely getting into the Hongji class. Amid the noise, Li Mu spoke calmly and told Chengdu to come with them to the conference room first. He said there was something they needed to discuss. Feng Liguo sat collapsed on the ground, completely ignored. Chengdu nodded and replied with a simple yes. He walked away with the principal and the mayor as the students watched in silence. The scene shifted to the conference room. Chengdu entered and politely greeted them again. Inside, 2 students were already present. One was Liu Bo, a senior from Liang City No. 2 High School and second place in the Liang City Youth Rankings. The other was Mo Leite, from Liang City No. 1 High School's Hongji class, ranked No. 1 in that class. They exchanged brief glances. They did not know each other. Their eyes met, then shifted away almost at the same time. The atmosphere was quiet and slightly awkward. After everyone took their seats, Wang Anchuan leaned forward and got straight to the point. He explained that the 100 cities under Purple Cloud District's jurisdiction were preparing to hold a competition for high school seniors, and that each city would send its top 3 senior students based on martial skill rankings, using the rankings as of 6 p.m. the previous night. The teams would be led by a warrior of level 15 or above, and would participate in a 3-day 100 cities championship held at High City No. 1 High School. As the explanation went on, Chengdu listened quietly. Mayor Wang then revealed the rewards. He said the top 10 finalists in the championship would receive different amounts of college entrance exam bonus points and prize money, starting at a minimum of 10 bonus points and 100,000 yuan. Chengdu lowered his gaze slightly, his expression turning serious. Mayor Wang looked at him and asked if he was willing to participate. Before Chengdu could answer, Molady raised his hand and spoke. He asked the mayor why the competition was not using virtual combat, since it was based on martial skill rankings. Mayor Wang answered calmly. He said that compared to virtual combat, the district leadership believed real combat was more effective. He explained that warriors would be present to ensure safety. During the matches, everyone would wear specially made suits and fight at the same life strength level. Chengdu thought calmly to himself. With his current martial skill level, he was at least within the top 20 of the Purple Cloud District. With his daily rate of improvement, reaching the top 3 should not be a problem. He lowered his gaze, his expression steady. Even if he did not make the top 10, this competition would still allow him to understand the true level of his peers. There was no need to put too much pressure on himself. Across the table, the mayor smiled gently and advised him not to overthink it. After a brief pause, Chengdu raised his hand and spoke clearly. He said that he would participate. Beside him, Mo Leite smiled and added that he would participate as well. The mayor laughed in satisfaction and praised them, saying that true heroes always emerged from the youth. He then informed them that they would be notified in advance once the departure time was confirmed and told them they could return to class. Later, as Chengdu walked out of the room, his thoughts turned heavy. If he could place in the top 3 of the 100 cities battle, his parents would no longer have to work themselves to exhaustion every single day. He clenched his hand slightly. He knew what he had to do. Chengdu resolved to secure a top 3 spot in the 100 cities battle. After that, Chengdu pushed open the classroom door and stepped inside. He paused for a moment and looked around. Usually classroom desks were labeled with students' names, but the Hongji class desks had no names at all. He hesitated briefly, then decided to sit anywhere for now. As soon as he pulled out a chair, a harsh voice rang out, telling him to get lost. A large hand slammed down near him. The voice demanded to know who he was and how he dared to sit there. Chengdu turned his head. Standing beside him was a huge, burly student. He was Pang Hu, ranked 10th in the Hongji class. His towering build made him look like a bear standing inside the classroom. Pang Hu leaned closer, looking down at Chengdu with a mocking smile. Chengdu met his gaze calmly and spoke, asking what era this was, and whether people were still trying to bully others at school. The atmosphere tightened instantly. Before Pang Hu could respond, someone stepped in between them. A hand landed gently on Chengdu's shoulder. Mo Leite spoke calmly, telling Pang Hu that Chengdu was here for the first time and did not yet understand the Hongji class rules. Chengdu felt his heart tighten. Mo Leite had approached him silently. That alone made Chengdu realize something was wrong. In his mind, he judged that the man's life strength must be at least 2 levels higher than his own. Pang Hu snorted coldly and waved his hand. He said that Chengdu was lucky. For Mo Leite's sake, he would let this matter go. Then Mo Leite spoke again, explaining the rules. He said that since this was Chengdu's first time in the Hongji class, he probably did not know that strength and status here were determined by seat numbers. He explained that every month, the Hongji class held a seat ranking battle using real combat. The results decided everyone's ranking. The bottom 10 students would be forced to stand during class for the entire following month. Chengdu listened quietly. He felt surprised. He had not expected the competitive pressure in the Hongji class to be this intense. Mo Leite added another detail. He said that since it was the beginning of the month, this month's seat rankings had already been arranged. He then pointed forward and told Chengdu that in a moment, he would compete for his seat number through a challenge format. Chengdu raised his eyes slightly and asked calmly whether, aside from being able to sit during class, there were any other differences in treatment based on seat number rankings. He explained that this mattered because it determined how much strength he should use. The answer came quickly. The higher the seat ranking, the better. The reason was simple. Seat rankings decided the amount of resources allocated to each student every month. Hearing this, Chengdu's eyes lit up. He said that this was definitely worth trying for. Resources were involved, so he needed to aim for the highest possible seat number. His resolve hardened. Just then, another voice interrupted. Class had already started, and everyone was told to head straight to the combat room next door. The students gathered inside the combat room, standing neatly in rows as the space opened before them. The instructor explained the rules. A challenger could issue up to 3 challenges. Based on their combat performance, a corresponding seat number would be assigned. Chengdu listened quietly. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and raised his hand. He announced clearly that he was challenging seat number 10. The moment the words left his mouth, the atmosphere shifted. The student ranked 10th stiffened. His eyes widened and a bead of sweat slid down his face. Around them, murmurs broke out. Students stared in disbelief. Someone exclaimed that Chengdu was challenging a top 10 position right from the start. Another whispered that he looked honest and simple, yet his actions were unexpectedly bold. Doubts followed just as quickly. Some students reasoned that even if Chengdu's martial skill level was outstanding, his life strength was far lower than others in the Hongji class. They believed that alone was not enough to challenge the top 10. Chengdu recalled the rule clearly. The resource allocation for 10th place was 50% higher than that of 11th place. That difference alone made it worth trying. He tightened his grip on the sword. His gaze sharpened, calm and resolute. Across from him, the student ranked 10th laughed loudly. He mocked Chengdu, saying that he had just arrived in the Hongji class yet already had such an attitude. He warned him not to end up crying after getting beaten. Chengdu looked at him and asked simply if he was the one ranked 10th. The burly student grinned and answered confidently that he was. He leaned forward, his expression full of arrogance, and told Chengdu that he was out of luck. The instructor called out loudly, telling Panghu to put on his protective gear and enter the arena. From the side, observed Chengdu quietly. He thought that Chengdu seemed to have a steady personality, yet he was surprisingly eager to prove himself. Still, he decided that this was fine. Letting him experience some hardship could also count as training. Panghu stepped forward, gripping his heavy hammer with both hands. His thick body radiated pressure as he stood firmly in place. Chengdu faced him from a distance, sword held calmly in his hand. The atmosphere in the combat room turned heavy. Chengdu's expression remained composed. His eyes were sharp and focused, showing no fear. A loud voice echoed through the room. The match began. Panghu grinned viciously and shouted at Chengdu, asking if he was ready. He told him to prepare to cling to his leg and beg for mercy. Chengdu stood calmly, a faint smile appearing on his face. He replied quietly that they would see about that. In the next instant, Panghu moved first. He swung his massive hammer forward with terrifying force, but Chengdu remained composed. A faint aura flowed around him as he stepped forward without panic. Panghu sneered and shouted that Chengdu was too slow. The heavy hammer descended toward him with overwhelming momentum. From the sidelines, students watched in shock. They exclaimed that, with such a speed difference, Chengdu's life strength level was a full rank lower than Panghu's. Some immediately concluded that Chengdu was finished and would lose in the next round. They said that even a 0.1 level gap in life strength could affect the outcome of a battle, let alone a full level difference. To them, Chengdu's defeat already seemed certain. The instructor watching from the side suddenly narrowed his eyes. He muttered in shock that Chengdu's life strength had reached level 5.2. Just yesterday it had only been 5.1. He could not understand how Chengdu had raised it to 5.2 in a single day. Meanwhile, Panghu laughed loudly, convinced of his victory. He shouted that Chengdu had already lost. His heavy hammer slammed down with crushing force. But in the next instant, Panghu's expression froze. He stared forward in disbelief, unable to understand what had happened. Shock spread across his face as sweat formed on his forehead. Chengdu had moved. In a single smooth motion, Chengdu lowered his body and shifted his stance. His sword rose with perfect precision. A flash of blue light burst upward. Before Panghu could react, Chengdu's blade surged from below like a rising tide, carrying immense power. The force of the strike exploded upward, lifting Panghu's massive body into the air. Panghu's eyes widened as his body was launched skyward. He could only let out a stunned sound, unable to comprehend how the situation had reversed so suddenly. Panghu's massive body was sent flying into the air. He could only shout in disbelief as he was thrown upward, completely unable to resist the force of Chengdu's strike. From below, dozens of students stared up in shock as his heavy body soared across the combat room. A moment later, Panghu crashed down onto the ground with a loud impact. The floor shook slightly as dust and shockwaves spread outward. The surrounding students widened their eyes, stunned by what they had just witnessed. No one expected the battle to end this quickly. Chengdu stood calmly in place, his sword still in hand. From the side, the instructor suddenly noticed the technique he had used. He stared at Chengdu's weapon and asked in disbelief if that was the Azure Dragon Thrust. He said that Chengdu's martial skill had already reached first-order perfection. Chengdu responded calmly. He said that he had simply broken through last night. Hearing this, the others were even more stunned. Reaching 90% mastery in a single night was something they could hardly believe. To them, it sounded completely insane. At that moment, the instructor's voice echoed across the combat room, announcing the result of the match. The winner was Chengdu. Chengdu relaxed slightly and lowered his sword, his expression returning to its usual calm as the outcome became official. The students around the arena erupted in shock. They stared at Chengdu and exclaimed that he had actually won despite a full-level difference. Some could not believe their eyes. Others shouted that it was incredible. He had taken the victory with just a single strike. Among the crowd, Mo Leti muttered that Chengdu truly was a late-blooming genius. The instructor stepped forward and announced that Chengdu had earned seat number 10. He asked if Chengdu wanted to continue challenging for a higher rank. Chengdu shook his head calmly and refused. He explained that even if he moved up a few more spots, the difference in resources would not be significant. It would be better to conserve his strength. The surrounding students immediately surrounded him. One of them smiled and took out his phone, asking to add Chengdu on WeChat since they were classmates and should stay in touch. Others quickly joined in, asking to be added as well. Chengdu looked slightly awkward under the sudden attention but still agreed politely. At that moment, Panghu slowly got back on his feet. His earlier arrogance was completely gone. He looked up at Chengdu nervously and called him big brother, asking him not to hold a grudge and to forget what he had said earlier. Chengdu looked at him calmly and thought to himself that Panghu really knew how to bend with the wind. After the match ended, Chengdu stood quietly among the students. Just then, a voice called out to him. The instructor told him to come to the office after class. Chengdu turned his head in surprise, wondering what it was about. Later, he knocked on the office door. A calm voice from inside told him to come in. Chengdu entered and saw the principal sitting behind a desk, writing something on a document. The atmosphere inside the office was quiet and formal. Meanwhile, Chengdu's instructor asked the principal whether there were any special recruitment slots left for Mount Everest Martial Arts University and Mount Tai Martial Arts University in their ecological zone. The principal, confused, asked the instructor to sit first and then questioned why he was asking about this. The instructor told the principal that he wanted to try and see if Chengdu could qualify through special recruitment. Upon hearing this, the principal's expression turned thoughtful. He explained that both Mount Everest Martial Arts University and Mount Tai Martial Arts University were ranked among the 8 great schools. Their minimum requirement for students was martial skill at first-order perfection. He continued, saying that Chengdu was only 1% away from reaching that level. However, that final 1% was an extremely difficult barrier to break. Instructor Ling Yun spoke impatiently and told the principal that there was no need for more discussion. He reminded him that there was a device in the office used for testing students' martial skill proficiency and suggested letting Chengdu try it. The principal sighed and replied that Ling Yun always overthought things. Still, he agreed and pointed toward the corner of the office, saying the testing device was over there. He explained that its maximum reading was first-order advanced, which made it perfect for evaluating students. Ling Yun immediately grabbed Chengdu by the shoulder and led him toward the machine. He instructed Chengdu to reproduce the same attack he had used during the seat battle and strike the proper spot on the device. Chengdu nodded calmly and stepped forward. His expression turned serious as he stood before the testing machine. He slowly raised his sword. A quiet stillness filled the room as he gathered his strength. In the next instant he moved. With a sharp motion, Chengdu unleashed his technique. Azure Dragon Thrust erupted forward in a brilliant surge of blue light, crashing toward the testing device with overwhelming force. A loud cracking sound echoed through the office. The testing device shattered under the impact of Chengdu's strike. Fragments scattered across the floor as the machine smoked and collapsed. The principal froze in shock, staring at the broken device. He exclaimed in disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. Nearby instructor Ling Yun spoke with equal surprise. He said he had not expected this either. Just yesterday afternoon, Chengdu had still been at the advanced stage, yet by last night he had already broken through. Now he had reached first-order perfection. Chengdu stood awkwardly beside the ruined machine, scratching the back of his head nervously. He apologized to the principal. He said he had not expected the device to break. Ling Yun, however, showed no concern for the machine. Instead, his expression turned excited and intense. He declared that Chengdu was absolutely a fighting genius. That instinct to win was extraordinary. He continued passionately, saying that in all his years of teaching, this was the first time he had met a student whose combat sense felt so seasoned. It was as if Chengdu had survived countless life-and-death battles. His instincts were incredibly sharp. Chengdu stood there quietly, his face slightly flushed as he held his sword. The principal fell into deep thought, one hand on his chin. After a moment, he spoke decisively. He declared that Chengdu was a true martial arts genius and must be prioritized for training. Temporarily, he ordered that Chengdu be given the same resources as seat number 1. He then added that he would personally handle communication regarding Chengdu's special recruitment. As for the 100 Cities tournament, he told Chengdu to make sure he fought for a top 3 spot. If he achieved that, everything else would be practically guaranteed. Chengdu raised his hand slightly and asked what special recruitment actually meant. Ling Yun explained calmly that to enter one of the 8 great schools through the normal college exam, a student's life strength had to reach at least level 6.5. With Chengdu's current life strength, reaching that level before the exam would be extremely difficult. However, through special recruitment, the requirement was different. Chengdu would only need his martial skill to reach first-order perfection 1 month before the exam. After the 100 Cities tournament, professors from Mount Everest Martial Arts University and Mount Tai Martial Arts University would personally come to assess him. If he performed well, he could be directly recruited. Chengdu listened carefully and then asked another question. He wondered if, after passing those schools' special recruitment, he would still be able to take the regular exam and apply elsewhere. Ling Yun looked at him with curiosity and asked if he already had a particular martial arts university in mind. Chengdu answered honestly. If possible, he said he would like to attend Huangshan Martial Arts University. However, instructor Ling Yun was confused and asked Chengdu why he wanted to attend Huangshan Martial Arts University since all 8 great schools offered similar resources. Chengdu explained that 6 years ago, in Yunlei district of Huxi City, a sudden disaster had struck. Giants ambushed the city without warning. Even though Huxi's defense corps and soldiers from nearby cities rushed in to help, their numbers were limited. Despite their efforts, tens of thousands of people still lost their lives in the chaos. The memory of that tragedy remained vivid. Chengdu quietly revealed his reason. He said he simply wanted his family to live safely. His eyes hardened with determination as he continued. If Liang City ever faced danger, he wanted to be able to rush back immediately and protect them. Ling Yun looked at him silently, understanding the weight behind those words. He remarked that such a reason was usually held by people who had lost everything before. Then he spoke with a hint of respect. To possess such resolve at such a young age, while still having a complete family, meant that Chengdu was someone capable of bearing